Hello. So in this example, we want to show how to compute some seasonal indices for some data that has seasonality and is given in terms of quarters. So if the data is quarters, then we have quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4. And here we have 3 years of data. So we have 12 quarters. So that means we have 3 years of data. And then we want to use those seasonal indices to do some predictions into the next year. So here we have our demand. So we have 3 years of data. This is quarter 1, this is quarter 2, quarter 3, and quarter 4. And then it starts over again. Quarter 1 is down here, 2, 3, and 4, and then 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now what I'm going to do is actually put in a little more information here so that I can remember this. This is quarter 1. Whoops. This is quarter 1. This is quarter 2. Let's see. This is quarter 3. And this is quarter 4. And just so I remember those, that's the first year, then this is the second year, then this is the third year. So like that. Okay. Because what we're going to be doing over here, first we're going to find a composite or sort of an average over how we do in quarter 1, 2, and 3, and 4. So this composite is going to be kind of an aggregate of the 3 years of data that I have over here. So in fact, it'll just be a straight average in our case. So the quarter 1 composite is going to be the average of all quarter 1s. The quarter 2 composite will be the average of all quarter 2s, and then so on. And then we'll take the overall average for all of the data that we have, and then we'll compute seasonal indices that'll tell us how each of the individual quarters do in comparison to that overall average. So this is exactly what you want to do to come up with seasonal indices. Remember, a seasonal index is supposed to tell you how you typically do in a particular period. And since we have quarters here, our seasonal indices will tell us how we typically do in quarter 1, and quarter 2, 3, and then 4. So we'll put the seasonal indices over here after we compute our composite first. Once we have the seasonal indices, we're going to use it to do some predictions down here. Okay, this same method applies to calculating seasonal indices for any kind of period. So you could calculate the seasonal indices for, say, monthly data if you wanted to, using this same technique. Instead of having 4 indices, you would have 12 if you're doing monthly data. Okay, so here's our demand. So remember, we have 3 years of demand. This is a quarter 1, this is a quarter 1, that's a quarter 1. So there's 3 years, quarters 1 through 4. And then we have the next year down here where we want to do our forecast. So let's start over here with the composite. With the composite, I want to take the average over all similar quarters. So I want to take the average here for this one over all quarter 1s. So I'm going to click that cell for quarter 1, and then I'm going to come down and click the next cell for quarter 1, put a comma, and then come down and click the last one for quarter 1. So we just have 3 years of data here. And I don't want to make those absolute references because I'm going to drag this formula down and get the composite for quarters 2, 3, and 4 in just a minute. So nothing is an absolute reference here. Okay, so that's the average for quarter 1s. Quarter 1 is 44.6 or 44.7 on average. That's how we do in quarter 1. All right, so if I take this and drag it down, I think I can pick up the composite for the other 3 quarters as well. Let's just click on it and make sure it looks fine. Those should all be quarter 2s averaged together. These should all be quarter 3s averaged together. And these should all be quarter 4s averaged together. So that looks great. Now let's do the overall average. And you have your choice about doing the overall average. You can just take the average of all the data over here. Or you can take the averages of these 4 quarters. And it turns out to be exactly the same number. So I'm just going to take the average of these guys over here. At return, and that's 49.33. So this is our overall average, and these are the averages for each individual quarter. This is how we do on average in quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, and quarter 4. This is on average how we do overall. So to get this seasonal index, or indices, what we're going to do is we're going to compare how we do typically in a particular quarter to how we do overall. And in fact, we're just going to divide those two values. So to get the seasonal indices, I'm going to take the quarter one composite and divide by the overall. And I'm going to make that absolute because when I drag this down, I don't want that reference to move out of that cell. So for each different quarter, each different seasonal index, we're going to compare the average from that quarter to the overall. So I want the overall to stay fixed in that cell in G9. So hit return. So that's 0.91 for an index there. That means that it's this average right here, 44.7, is 9% below how we do overall. Good. So drag that down, and then let's click on some of those and make sure they refer to the right thing. They look like they're okay. Good. And now if I sum these together, because these indices over here are 1-based, when I sum these together, they should wind up being 4. So let's just sum those. They look like they do. Add up to 4, but just to check. 4. Good. So if you were doing monthly data and had 12 different seasonal indices, when you summed up the seasonal indices for that situation, you would get 12. Okay, so here we are. We have our seasonal indices here. And this tells us, again, the interpretation here is typically in quarter one, we're 9% below our average overall. And then typically in quarter two, we're right at the average. Typically in quarter three, we're 14% above the overall average. And then in quarter four, we're 5% below the overall average. So we can use these indices to do predictions now. And that's what we're going to do over here. So I'm going to go ahead and get a graph of this first. I'm just going to select all this data here for these columns, starting with the quarter number through the demand and the forecast, and then also the seasonal forecast, so that we can see all of it on the same graph. And I'm going to say Insert Chart. There it is. I don't want a column chart. I want the line chart. And it looks like I don't need that stuff down there. I think the way to fix that is just to click on that stuff. Good. And now I want to change the range here of this axis. So I'd like to just go from 40 up to 60 is probably fine. Okay. And let's also get, can I get the lollipops while I'm here as well? So I'm going to hit return. And then go back to setup, customize. I think I got to go to customize to get those. Yeah, and then go down to series, and then go to point size. Let's select 10, and let's get those. Okay, so now put that down. And so far so good. Let's see, let's put in what we're going to use for our baseline forecast over here. So say the forecast is a little bit better than the overall average. So say we have an idea that we're going to increase sales a little bit, and we can expect the demand to be maybe 53 for each, or the next, on average for the next 4 periods. So, okay. So for the next year, say that's our forecast, right? That's our average forecast, and that's our baseline average forecast. And then based on that, what would our seasonal forecast be? So this doesn't have seasonality in it. It's just flat, straight across average, so it's just a baseline. But to put seasonality into data, you have to multiply by a seasonal index. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this value right here and then just multiply it by the first quarter, the first seasonal index, which is quarter one index. And then I'm going to take those and drag them down and see what I get over here. Beautiful. So over here, and now I'm going to fix this graph up a little bit. Let's go up to 70 maybe. And then let's also see about putting in the rest of the lollipops over here. Oh, let's go up to maybe 17 there. So 17 there for a maximum. And then also over here on this, both the forecast and the seasonal forecast, let's put in the lollipops. So I'm going to move this over. So let's go here, edit chart, and then go over to customize series. Which series I want the forecast. Let's put in the lollipops on that. And then let's also go to the seasonalized forecast. And I wish there was an easy way to do this. Okay, so put those in as well too. Now let's take a look what we have. So here's our forecast. It's that average forecast that went straight across there. And that was this value right here, this 53, right? So that's that average forecast. And then when we seasonalize that forecast, we just multiply each of those values by the seasonal indices that we found over here, and that creates the pattern from the seasonality for the next year. And if you look, it matches the pattern that we got from the previous 3 years as well too. It's just a little bit higher up because we expect on average our average forecast to be a little bit higher than the overall average from last year. So it's a little bit higher, but it has the same shape as it had before. So that's how you find seasonal indices. Typically you somehow average over historical data that you have, and you average like periods. So in this case we averaged all like quarters. So quarter one's got average, quarter two's got average, quarter three's got average, and quarter four's got average. And that gave us 4 indices, which we then used to do a seasonal forecast into the next year.